Good morning, everyone. And on behalf of Dr. Carla Hayden, the Librarian of Congress, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the library. My name is Robert Newlen. I have the pleasure of serving as the Deputy Librarian of Congress. We are delighted to be partnering with the Kennedy Center and Washington Performing Arts in co-hosting this special symposium, Leading the Change, Orchestra Innovation, and the Shift Festival. There's been a wonderful buzz about this excellent and exciting festival around Washington this week, about the great concerts and events like this one that reach out into the community of music lovers, and we're really pleased to be part of it. I would first like to acknowledge our partners, the creators and presenters of the Shift Festival. First, and I can only say the fabulous Deborah Rutter, the president of the Kennedy Center, who was traveling with the National Symphony Orchestra this week in its Russia trip. Robert Van Leer, the center's vice president for programming. And Jenny Bilfield, president and CEO of Washington Performing Arts. I know that among our audience this morning, we have music lovers, composers, arts professionals, and representatives for several of the very top orchestras in the nation. And I would like to welcome particularly Jesse Rosen, President and CEO of the League of American Orchestras. It's very appropriate for us to host you today because great music has a very strong tradition here at the library. Many of you are probably aware of our historic concert series, now over 90 years old. This wonderful auditorium that you're sitting in, that's a bit chilly this morning, was built in 1925 by Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge in a groundbreaking public-private partnership. And it's been the home of terrific concerts over the years, everything from classical, jazz, pop, country, and much more. Our stage has seen the premiere of Aaron Copland's Appalachian Spring, now an icon of the repertoire, along with performances by composers from Bartók to Bernstein and Stevie Wonder. And I invite you to spend some time looking at the display of manuscripts our curators have prepared for you, just a few of the major orchestral works in our vaults. Here at the library, we share your passion for creating superb and vibrant programs that open all our doors to the widest, most diverse, and most engaged audiences possible. Like you, we are committed to innovation and to outreach and education and increased access for young people. I should mention that a little later, you'll hear a stellar youth orchestra group from Play On Philly, which traveled down this morning just to perform for you. On a personal note, I've been reading a lot about Shift and the kinds of outreach you do. As somebody that had virtually no music education as a child or as a teenager, the kind of work you're doing is so important, and I wish I'd had the opportunity to be exposed to the kinds of things you're doing. Regarding our current programs here at the library, I can't resist by leaving you with mention of something that you may have read about in the New York Times yesterday, and that is something that's coming to the library the first week of May. It's called Bibliodiscotheque, and it's a library-wide celebration of disco culture, music, dance, and fashion. So over the week, we're going to have a number of music experts, panels that are all open to the public. Tim Gunn from Project Runway will be here to talk about 70s fashion. And the week will be capped on Saturday, May 6th, with a disco party in the Great Hall featuring none other than Gloria Gaynor. So we are so excited. Ms. Gaynor's song, I Will Survive, was put on our song registry and got lots of publicity, so we decided let's really celebrate this and bring Ms. Gaynor to the library, so she graciously agreed. So watch our website. It is a ticketed event, but it's free, so take a look at our website because I know tickets will go very, very fast. So let me state finally that at the Library of Congress, music of all kinds is a crucial and vibrant element in our mandate to preserve and present the best in our American culture. Thank you so much for coming today. If this is your first visit to the library, I hope it won't be your last. Check out our website, loc.gov. We have programs all year long in music and every other topic you can imagine. This is your library. It belongs to the United States and to the world. So we're just delighted to have you here, and please enjoy your day. Thanks again.
Good morning. I'm Jenny Bilfield with Washington Performing Arts. It's wonderful to see you all today. Excuse me, just one moment. And thank you so much, Robert, for the wonderful introduction of our guests. We're so happy to be here, very grateful to the Library of Congress. And I want to welcome you on behalf of Washington Performing Arts, the League of American Orchestras, and the Kennedy Center. I bring greetings from Deborah Rutter, my friend and collaborator, who is traveling with the National Symphony Orchestra this week in Russia, and she couldn't be here. I know that she's very disappointed to miss participating in a festival that she has so strongly believed in and been committed to from the very, very beginning. So after 2.5 years of planning, we have arrived at this week, and it's very exciting to start it here in a place that is of music and has had such an important impact in the cultural life of this country. I wanted to give you a little bit of a background about SHIFT, and it was really founded based upon a vantage point of optimism about orchestras, and a sense that orchestras are the hubs of culture and learning within and outside their institutions. Very often, orchestras make the news when there's some strife, when there's a strike or a negotiation or something is going poorly. And in contrast, Deborah and I felt very strongly that there were wonderful stories to be told, and that orchestras were doing some of the most creative, energizing, and energized work within the arts world, and we wanted to tell that story. We also believed that if audiences could experience this, they might actually shift their perceptions of orchestras. So for that reason, SHIFT was the name, a shift in mindset, a shift in perception, a shift in experience. So I hope if you travel through the whole week with us, you will have that experience yourself. We were inspired by the multi-year series of orchestral performances in New York under the name of Spring for Music that were presented at Carnegie Hall by Tom Morris, Mary Lou Falcone, and David Foster, and designed to highlight creative programming. We are very grateful for their example and the impact of their work and their lifelong commitment to orchestras. From the get-go, Washington Performing Arts and the Kennedy Center wanted to think expansively and to extend the notion of a festival to mini-residencies within a festival, and that's what this week is about. We wanted to focus on orchestras of all sizes, as you'll see, and we wanted to in some way transpose the great work that orchestras do in their hometowns and cities to our DC community. We believe that we had the institutional commitment, scale, and partners to undertake this. And we thought, of course, what better place to showcase this work than in the nation's capital, the seat of government, the center of diplomacy and policy making, and quite an extraordinary arts community as well. Orchestras that applied to our national call for proposals rose to the occasion, and they offered programs and residency plans that were ambitious, specific, and completely and utterly reflective of what they do well and what they value. The ideas leapt off the page. And coincidentally, all seemed to express their unique identity through very specific collaborations, commissions, partnerships, and a healthy dose of contemporary American music. American orchestras coming to the nation's capital with a bumper crop of American works, we were inspired. Today's symposium will give us a chance to discuss why SHIFT is important, not just in this hyper-focused lens of a one-week festival, but more broadly, in the context of orchestras' value within their communities. We'll look at the risks and rewards of innovation, explore what's gotten us to this point, and we'll have a chance to actually hear music with the Play On Philly Chamber Ensemble. Very happy to have music at the centerpiece of this festival and this symposium. From the get-go, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation supported our vision and provided generous seed funding that enabled us to greenlight SHIFT, and I'm very pleased that Susan Fader can be here to see how this all unfolds. Mellon's support was matched by Tina and Gary Mather, Michael and Noemi Nydorf, and the Centene Charitable Foundation, the DC Commission on Arts and Humanities, which is an agency supported in part by the National Endowment for the Arts, and also by the Abramson Family Foundation, Betsy and Robert Feinberg, Morton and Norma Lee Funger, and Daniel R. Lewis, among other donors. We're very grateful for their support, and we could not have done it without them, literally. Huge thanks to our teams, boards, our partners, and to the participating orchestras, the staff, musicians, and their boards. A special shout out to Samantha Pollack from Washington Performing Arts and Jamie Brumis, counterparts who worked so closely and really bore the lion's share of organizing this. They are treasures, and when you see them, thank them, give them a squeeze. They deserve every good wish and our great appreciation for their efforts in putting this together. And to Kathy French, who believed in this idea from the very beginning. She was part of Spring for Music, and she is here in Washington, D.C., and a lifelong friend of the arts, and a longtime CEO of the League of American Orchestras. Jesse Rosen is her successor. We're very grateful, Kathy, for your support early on. I'm so happy that so many of you who believed in this early on are here with us today to see how this is launched. We're very grateful. So I'll play the role of MC today, as you may have gathered, and very soon moderator for the first panel. But right now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Rhona Wolfe Friedman, who is a commissioner on the DC Commission of Arts and Humanities. She is one of our city's most emphatic evangelists for the arts, and she's a cherished friend. She's an attorney with master's degrees in clinical psychology and decorative arts. She's hardly an underachiever. She's a remarkable and accomplished woman. The focus of her advocacy and commission tenure have been in arts education policy and also around quantifying and growing the creative economy in Washington, D.C. She is on the board of the ARC, which is an acronym for the Town Hall Educational Arts and Recreation Center, and she served on the boards of the Washington Ballet and Lab School. She is fiercely committed to this community and to its citizens. We've asked her to open our symposium by speaking about the importance of shift and orchestras as an essential civic asset in strengthening our communities. Please join me in welcoming Rhona Wolfe Friedman.
Good morning. I'd like to thank the Library of Congress for hosting this wonderful symposium, and a huge debt of gratitude to the Kennedy Center and Washington Performing Arts and the League of American Orchestras for their collaborative efforts in presenting SHIFT, the Festival of American Orchestras. How lucky we are in our nation's capital to have a week-long immersive musical experience. The concept of SHIFT defines what is happening in the arts today. The SHIFT Festival here celebrates American music, highlights different size orchestras, where they perform, and whom they serve. This focus on American orchestras allows audiences and participants to educate themselves about music, perhaps not familiar to them. At the same time, it affords participating orchestras the chance to showcase new compositions and perform their finest works. What a winning combination we have here, music and distinctive outreach programs. We think about the shifting landscape. I would like you to think about President John F. Kennedy's quote, "Art means more than the recitation of the past. It means the free and unconfined search for new ways of expressing the experience of the present and the vision of the future." In the broadest sense, the arts, including the humanities, can be thought of as the 4 C's: curiosity, creation, connection, and communication. In 1943, Abraham Maslow proposed a theory of human motivation, now called the hierarchy of human needs. It encompassed eventually innate curiosity. He formed a pyramid with base needs at the bottom: safety, moving up the ladder to love, belonging, esteem, and finally, self-actualization. I submit that the arts play a vital role in meeting so many of our human needs. They help provide an understanding of our emotions, increase our self-awareness, and bridge the gap between different cultures. How would a society be able to preserve and share its culture, progress, and valued traditions if not for the arts? People connect, thrive, and prosper through the arts. In our complex world today, the arts are a necessary tool to help manage the shifting, dynamic issues we face. We cannot replace the arts, nor allow them to be diminished. They are a lens from which to look at the past and look forward to the future. Without the arts, we become a silent society, unable to accurately evaluate our surroundings. Orchestras, as an indispensable art form, play an important part in American life. They are part and parcel of our life today, in both large and small communities. They improve the quality of the cultural fabric of a community and foster pride in local neighborhoods. In 2016, Ian David Moss discussed the arts in the Stanford Social Innovation Review. He suggested using a holistic approach, tying the arts into well-being and quality of life. We can use this same approach to expand the definition of what an orchestra is, promoting well-being and enhancing the quality of life. Orchestras are a critical resource for arts education. Playing different instruments, they demonstrate teamwork at its highest level. Older models of music education are shifting today. Schools with orchestra-based programs are demonstrating that their populations have greater skills than students lacking a musical education. While students develop musical talents, they're also increasing competencies in subjects such as math and reading. To be pragmatic, the arts make money. They are a critical economic driver and force in this country. Orchestras play a key role in an economy of a city. They help populations develop skills that are transferable and assist in the revitalization of neighborhoods. Both large and small orchestras understand that they need to be relevant to their communities. Today, they're engaging in novel ways to include residents with varying economic, racial, and social backgrounds. A necessary shift is transforming the way orchestras strengthen, broaden, and deepen their relationships. The shift is multidimensional. Orchestras are connecting and serving the community, not by exclusivity, but by inclusivity. Orchestras should keep advancing a very basic concept that a healthy community must have an orchestra, and demonstrate that this orchestra is a powerful tool to form connections and promote vibrancy throughout the community. Some approaches an orchestra may consider to remain relevant are: 1, act with a purpose, one that's directed outside of the orchestra itself. Pursue goals that serve community needs. Evaluate what works and what's dead weight. Move ahead with strategies that are working and stay focused. Play towards strength. Reality can bite. Lessen the sting with realistic goals that allow for shifts. Leverage the power of orchestra leaders and musicians to forge dynamic community interactions through education, networking, and engagement. And last, reboot. Reboot to help work for a paradigm shift in the way a community views orchestra. Encourage experimentation in thought and action, which brings me back to the Shift Festival. Focusing on orchestras in our nation's capital is a powerful reminder of their importance. This does not detract from non-orchestral musical expression. This creative festival moves forward with goals, purpose, and community involvement. It demonstrates how music can lift the human spirit, how orchestras are involved in our community, and for a $25 ticket, how people can connect with an art form that has withstood the test of time. And finally, I would be remiss as the member of an arts commission that receives money from the National Endowment for the Arts if I did not offer a reminder of how critical the NEA is for sustaining the arts, not just here, but in every community in this country. The NEA sends grants to every congressional district in the nation. It's imperative to fight for its survival. Thank you, and please enjoy the Shift Festival.
Thank you, Rhona. That was such a perfect introduction to the topic of this panel, and I would love, having had a chance to introduce Rhona, to also introduce the other panelists. To Rhona's left, we have Thomas Wilkins, the music director of the Omaha Symphony, principal conductor of the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra, who also holds a chair with the Boston Symphony for family and youth concerts. He is so active nationally, a very inventive programmer, and I've had the pleasure of watching his work over many years, and my kudos to you. I know that you're equally committed to community development and arts education, but well beyond the arts as well. I was interested to see that you're on the boards of the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce, the Charles Drew Health Center in Omaha, the Center Against Spouse Abuse in Tampa Bay, and the Museum of Fine Arts in St. Petersburg, which is very expansive, and I hope you'll speak about how all these different commitments and interests and passions intersect in your musical work. I'm also delighted that you have studied at Shenandoah University, which is a source of wonderful training and many musicians, and also at the New England Conservatory. So you grew up not terribly far from Washington. Thank you so much for being here. And then to my right, Stanford Thompson, who's a trumpeter and the executive director and founder of Play On Philly, which you'll have a chance to hear a little bit in about 45 minutes or an hour. In 2010, he founded the El Sistema Inspired Program in Philadelphia, where he currently serves as executive director. And he's secured over $9 million in funding, which has definitely impacted the lives of hundreds of children in Philadelphia. Believes orchestras offer us lessons in leadership, innovation, diversity, and inclusion, and his work absolutely speaks to that. His vision is very sharp and focused. He's trained as a professional trumpeter, active across many ensembles. He performs and teaches, collaborates, conducts master classes. He's a native of Atlanta, Georgia, so one of your orchestras is coming to visit. I love that this all ties together, yes. And he holds degrees from the Curtis Institute of Music, New England Conservatory's Ebro Fellows Program. He serves on the boards of the Curtis Institute of Music, Interlochen Center for the Arts, the Philadelphia chapter of the American Composers Forum, and the El Sistema USA and the Philadelphia Wind Symphony. So thank you all for being here. Many different experiences and approaches to our discussion. I will sit down. I wanted to do a more formal introduction, but thank you. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to what this shift is from your vantage point. What's happened in the past 10 years that is noteworthy to you and important to reflect upon at this moment in this gathering?
Oh. Good morning. I mean, I think for me, it goes back a little bit longer than just the past 10 years. I think it's really important to understand that the orchestras that we enjoy today were built around a social mission back, gosh, I mean, starting in the 1880s, especially going into the beginning of the next century. These were immigrants that were coming to America. They were setting up new communities. If it was Minneapolis or Chicago or Boston or Philly or Baltimore or New York or Cincinnati or Cleveland, what was important to keep those communities together was their culture and their identity, and a lot of that revolved around classical music and orchestras. The musicians played an important role in making sure that community music schools were set up, that orchestras were established, and that they were actually working hand in hand. Philadelphia is a perfect example. 1900, the orchestras formed. 1904, the Settlement Music School. They were teaching kids in the community for a nickel or less. And then they found out 20 years after that, some of the kids were pretty good. So they created the Curtis Institute of Music. And for the first 4 years, tuition was $500 a year, a lot of money. And they thought that was pretty crazy because, of course, a lot of the families could not afford to pay it. So the woman who founded the school, who also founded the Settlement Music School and also helped to found the Philly Orchestra, put down $12 million in 1928 to make sure that there was a tuition-free policy. And there was this connection between the musicians that played and taught and mentored, and it was all around trying to, in many ways, keep body and soul together. So all of that stuff, it just blossomed. In the 60s, it was wonderful, because then you had Wallace Foundation and Ford Foundation, a couple of others that said, I think that these musicians and the music that they're providing to the community should be made more available. So they turned orchestras into full-time gigs, 52 weeks. And there was a shift. And the money shifted towards those musicians, endowments were created, orchestras were more healthy. But the public, they were picking up the cost and making sure that kids had access to music in all the schools. And that worked until the early 80s. And of course, that infrastructure in the public schools started to fall apart to what we are now experiencing. And it's at a point where there's not enough public money, but sure, these orchestras have a bunch. And that's where the money is. And I work with organizations where we're trying to, I think collectively among several of the boards that I'm on, we're trying to raise $500 million for endowments. Now, not to say that the orchestras don't deserve them, and they do, but when we watch the infrastructure for music falling apart, knowing that used to be a really strong connection and it was important, then of course, what will the shift be now? So, I just think that $500 million in Philadelphia, for example, that organizations between the orchestra and Curtis, $500 million, that they need for their endowments. I think $500 million invested in youth in the city would definitely go a long way with, of course, making classical music and orchestras much more relevant. I think would also open up, and as we have found, and even the money that we have raised, a vast majority of that money comes from education and social service, private funders that want to see something different. There's more money there. So when I look at the shift, I hope that the shift that we make is that we can no longer divorce those who play music and those who teach the music. Because I think both of those actually working together is exactly the infrastructure and foundation that we really need to build and grow professional orchestras in the country.
Thank you, and I want to come back to some of the themes and give Tom a chance to weigh in.
There was a time in my life when I was really irritated by the word relevance, because I believed, and to your point, it really goes back further than the last 10 years. We came up with the word relevant in our industry because we were losing traction. And we were indeed losing traction of funders as well, but we were losing interest in the population. And so we had to come up with a way to justify our existence. And so we started using this word relevant. But I'm not convinced that across the board we were committed to relevance. We were committed. I thought maybe a different word would have been engagement or a deeper connection. I've wanted to be a conductor since I was 8 years old. And I first heard an orchestra when I was 8 years old. And I was born to a single mother on welfare, living in a housing project. And when I talked to funders and leaders in communities about this, I say that music literally saved my life. And so I come at music from a different perspective. If I believe that it is life-affirming and life-altering in my case, as it surely is, why would I want to leave anyone behind in a community? I'm not worried about Mozart's ability to take care of himself or Beethoven's ability to take care of himself. There's a reason why we still listen to that music today. What I was worried about was how we get that music to people so that it can be life-altering and life-affirming. And so I have always believed that relevance had to be earnest. And that meant that we had to find ourselves in places other than a concert hall, and we had to be okay with that. And we had to be comfortable with that, because if you can't get past me, you'll never believe that this music is as transformative as it is. And so I would like to think that this idea of shift means that orchestras all across this nation are really figuring out that if this music is as life-changing as it is incumbent upon us to get it to as many entities and people groups as possible. I often say that I try to take my music more seriously than I take myself. So I don't mind if I'm sitting in a community center at the Omaha Housing Authority with kazoos and a room full of people who don't have any options. But now all of a sudden, here is one that they do have. And it's the only one that we have to offer, but it's the best one.
Rhona, is there something you'd like to add?
Well, I know as part of the commission, that's our goal, is to reach out into the communities, especially in DC, east of the river, which is the underserved communities in DC. And as a board member of the ART, that's what we do. We bring music, art, theater across the river. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think if you don't reach out into the community and connect, not just reach out, that music endeavors will fail.
I think that part of it was, I gave a speech to MOLA, which is the Major Orchestra Librarians Association, because my librarian in Omaha hosted it one year, and it was called No Excuses Necessary. And what I did just for fun was I played 3 recordings. One was Andante Cantabile of Tchaikovsky, and another was something by Grieg. And when I played those excerpts, you could see all the librarians in the room, and they were going, "Oh, this is so cool!" Oh, this, you know. And then I played the last of Bernstein's 3 Dances from On the Town. And you could see them all kind of looking at each other and smiling. And the point was, my point was, you know, the Tchaikovsky is actually a drinking song. I have a coin. I found a coin I want to drink. I forget what the exact title is. I have a coin I want to drink. Those composers like Tchaikovsky and Beethoven, not so much Beethoven, but Mozart for sure, Mahler for sure, they understood that if their music was going to have a mass appeal to the general public, it had to relate to them. And that's why we have klezmer and Mahler, and that's why we have folk music and the whole nationalistic sort of school of composition. But we in America almost feel as if we have to apologize when Americanism finds itself in our music. We come up with words like, it's a synthesis of jazz, you know, so that it sounds intellectual. And I'm thinking, why should we apologize for that? Why? It's because we have always believed that we operate in basically a Western European tradition. And we believe that if we don't live our lives, speak our language, and carry our attitudes in that tradition, that people aren't going to take us seriously.
Right. Well, you know, and you've hit on so many interesting things here. The first I want to touch upon is this shift from the let's say, call it relevance, from the purview of one department. Education community outreach is responsible, and then the rest of the orchestra does this, to actually shifting the institutional DNA to be one that is much more porous and has that sense of excitement from the top, from the directors, the founders, leaders, to feel and to be very present with the community and in the community, and to have the community feel as if it's monolithic, but to have members of the community feel very part of the orchestra. And it's not, you know, simply to secure that grant or to check a box. It's actually to fundamentally rearrange the DNA of an orchestra to be a community, a living, breathing, evolving community institution. So that's a very big shift as well. Ironically, in speaking with European orchestras, which are the ones that, you know, theoretically American orchestras have in the past tried to emulate, some of the most adventuresome, well-resourced education programs and community-based programs are on display with European orchestras. So as American orchestras are building that sense of porousness, so many European orchestras have been in the vanguard of that through very imaginative collaborations. I would love if both of you would speak about some of the things that have excited you most musically when you have really been at sort of the most open, engaging, porous, what as music directors, as creative innovators yourselves, what are examples of moments when that's come together and just been so satisfying?
Oh, wow. We shared one in Detroit.
Oh, that's, okay. Tell us.
At the, gosh, it's last month?
Yeah, I think so.
Right. Wow, yeah, last month. No, I mean, this was at the Sphinx conference and their competition. It's, gosh, a 20-year-old organization founded by Aaron Dworkin, who is now the head of or the dean of the music school, art school at University of Michigan. But they've been focused over the past 20 years in really kind of pushing the diversity and inclusion a conversation in the field of classical music. So a lot of success that they have seen over that amount of time. But they host every year a competition for string players, both pretty much high school and college age students. And they also run side by side a conference called Sphinx Connect. And at the competition, after the competitors were there, we performed a piece by Joel Thompson, The Last Words of the Unarmed, which literally took the last words of people like Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, but there were, I believe, 7 people that were highlighted, but it literally took the last 2 or 3 words and put it into a really, really powerful 15-minute piece. And I will say, I mean, it was the most powerful experience I've ever had on a stage. We all have been around the conversations. We've seen everything on the news. We've heard all the arguments from all sides. But to have that artistic display, I'll never forget the first rehearsal. I was playing trumpet in the orchestra. I was not, but sitting there, I mean, it was tough. I mean, that first rehearsal for everybody in the orchestra was really difficult to get through. And I believe the connection that we made at that performance was something I've never felt, I've never seen. And I just think when something is to not use relevant, but something that is that engaging, that puts a spotlight on a really big problem that we're having, and that we've done that through the medium of an orchestra, I believe that we made a really powerful connection that I think a lot of people that were in that hall that day will be able to build upon.
There are several that I think of, but we have in Omaha what we call community partners, and they range anywhere from the Nebraska Medical Center to Girls Inc., the Omaha Housing Authority. So there are a lot of things that we do that are less attached to a performance and more attached to either delivering music or delivering access to music. But for me, I still have to go back to this Omaha Housing Authority example, where we send musicians out. There's a retirement center that exists there, and these are indeed people who have no options left. And some are elderly, most are elderly, but some are not. This is just where they land. And so we send musicians out on a regular basis, and our education person asked if I would be willing to go out, and I said, yeah, but let's do something fun. And we literally brought in kazoos, I'm not kidding. And my job was to conduct this now kazoo orchestra. And I must say that we spent more time laughing, because there's nothing more ridiculous than that scene. But what really sort of blessed my heart was when they got to come to my concert. Now, in Omaha, we have now it's a 10-year-old, but at the time it was newer, $100 million concert hall. And these people didn't even know where it was, let alone walk in the building. And so not only were they at the concert, but then we closed the hall afterwards, and we spent time together in the room, in the hall. And what was so poetic was that here was this group of people with no predisposition to this music. All of a sudden, this room was theirs, and this orchestra was theirs, and this conductor was theirs. And in fact, one of the ladies said, I feel as if this is all ours. I mean, she literally said that. And, are they going to buy a ticket down the road? No, they're not. But we have done our job in making sure that they understand. I mean, one of the great gifts of music is that it tells us that we were built for something greater than the despair that we probably experience on a regular basis. And this was one of those moments when they could say, you know what, I was made for something better than this. So that was, for me, that was my best memory to date.
Yeah, I mean, 2 very profound moments around music and shared space. And through the eloquence of kazoo, or
or something even more profound, right?
Or commissioned work,
Right.
but in very different context, different repertoire, but with a sense of vision and leadership that helped define that. I mean, how well equipped are orchestras to initiate that conversation, or comfortable, confident reaching out to partners who are perhaps better equipped than they are? Because not every institution has a smooth transition to new leadership, to partnerships, especially if an orchestra is a dominant institution in a community. Sometimes the messiness of partnership can be unfamiliar. So how do orchestras embrace that? And you've created an orchestra and would love these sort of different perspectives as you're starting up and asserting a vision and a presence and a mission.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a lot of fear of, I mean, I remember when we started, people were like, are kids gonna sign up? Are they gonna show up? Are they gonna drop out in big numbers? Why would they want to, in our program, spend 3 hours every day after school learning music, especially classical music? And same thing goes for, I think partnerships all around. For example, what the Philly Orchestra does is that they present groups from the community in the lobby before performances. And there was some interest from Simon Rattle to work with our kids 5 years ago, 4 and 5 years ago, when he was in town. And instead of having him come up to the school, he agreed to put the kids on the stage right at the beginning of the concert. The orchestra wasn't going to play an overture, but the kids were going to play. And it was a really scary thing to go back and forth between should they be in the lobby or should they be on the stage. The patrons did not pay to hear students from West Philly that had only been playing a year and a half. What would the union do? And of course the musicians have to warm up on the stage for a certain period of time, and then what happens if there's overtime, and what happens? I mean, there were all these questions. But I mean, it was wrapped in a lot of fear. Like how would the kids handle that? How would the audience handle that? Would it be uncomfortable? Not to say the kids were playing perfectly in tune and-
But all the negatives of fear.
Correct.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening is that actually it was a very magical experience. We even talked about concert tickets. The orchestra makes a lot of money when Simon Rattle's in town. But parents bought tickets at $90, $130 to be in the room. When that sold out, we opened up an overflow room. We set up a TV so that more families could come in, and that room was packed. And in many ways, there was this connection between, the parents see how hard their kids work.
Yeah.
And of course, being able to now connect that to a professional orchestra and put that work into perspective of what's going on was powerful. The other part of it is, to be completely honest and candid, there are not many opportunities where a room full of people typically look like the typical white audience in a city like Philadelphia are ever on their feet clapping for a group of kids in West Philly, honestly.
Yep.
And to see that connection between kids standing up, accepting that applause at the end, saying they're all clapping for me, and watching the parents feel they're all clapping for my kid. That was a really powerful bond that was connected, and I think has allowed our relationship and partnership with the orchestra and many others to flourish. So a lot of it is, we also, both organizations received big donations after that.
Yes.
In the seven figures. And it just was a good thing to do. It was a great experience.
We've done some of that here too with Washington Performing Arts. We don't have the ensemble of an orchestra on a regular basis, but when there's an opportunity to showcase either our gospel choirs that are our gospel choirs or some of the young performers in our education programs, we do it. And we do think about that because there will be we'll get the nasty gram. I will usually get the nasty gram from someone who, paid for one thing, they got another. And my response is always, you know what, I'm so glad that you came to the performance and had the opportunity to hear some of the young artists who are working towards perhaps being in the audience or on stage in the future. It's part of our mission. And I speak, if there has been a residency activity in the community, I speak about it from the stage every single time, because I think that people understand the finished product because they come and the lights and the stands and everything is set. They don't necessarily understand the granularity of the process. They don't understand, or they're not even aware of the role of the teachers in the classroom playing side by side, the buses, the parents driving, the catering, the kids taking time off from studying, coming out early in the morning, staying late at night. There's a process, and in some ways I worry that we have orchestrated such a polished finished product that we've done it at our own disservice, because it's hard to make that the urgency of supporting the finished product really articulate without showing the process where the real time and cost and investment are. Oh. And so I think, with the question of how all of this is going to happen, we simply have to say it is going to happen, and it's going to be awesome, and you're going to be really sad that you missed it. And that it's that sort of confidence. There will be cranky people who feel, and organizations that are insecure about it, but it's the leaders of the organizations who have to take that deep breath and do it. And
we at the Hollywood Bowl, we on a regular basis are joined by Yola Youth Orchestra Los Angeles on stage. I have had them several times playing by themselves and also playing with the orchestra. And we spoke in our sort of pre-meeting, we talked about this a little bit, about how important it is for us to give words to people who are not in our business, because they don't know our language. They're not supposed to know our language. We shouldn't expect them to, and we shouldn't feel bad that they don't. It is our job to teach them our words. And I will often say to the audience, when they applaud for those kids, how grateful I am that they took the time to say to these kids, we are surrounding you, we believe in you, and we want nothing but the best for you. And at that moment, the audience has nothing better to do than to take that responsibility, and they sit up a little taller in their seats and go, oh yeah, that's right, that's what we're doing. Therefore, it is now important to them, and now they understand why Yola's there. Right,
and consistently. It's not just a one-off.
Right.
It becomes a regular diet so that it's integral to the organization. I mean, Rhona, I would love if you would speak about the role of the Commission in supporting so many important arts programs that reach schools and kids and professional musicians, and it's a very wide range of support that the Commission provides to do much of this sort of activity.
We started with a very small budget in a couple of millions, and we went up to 18 million, and we're hoping to go up to 25 million. Do you hear that? And we support a whole range of different programming through our granting program. We're a granting organization. And what we do is we have different categories of grants. We have startup organizations, we have large, we have a heritage grant for those who have been in existence. And people apply, and through a panel, grants are awarded throughout the city. And we have a separate program, as I mentioned before, for East of the River to help empower underserved communities. And you were mentioning before about how you reach out into the community. And I want to take your point of those of us, me included, who does not raised in a musical background. You do have to reach out to the audience and make them feel that they're important despite the fact that they know nothing about the musical instrument, the composition, the notes on the page. And with that, I think comes, and I call it connection, I don't call it relevancy. I think it becomes a partnership. And I think it's important for audiences to partner with orchestras and with musical events too. And that's what WPA does so well. They go out into the community and they reach to all different types of populations, and they bring them into their fold, welcome them into their fold. And that to me is why WPA is so successful.
Well, thank you. I mean, one of the things, and this was the mantra of our founder, and I was very pleased to hear that the Library of Congress actually has some of Patrick Hayes' archives on display outside. I'm looking forward to seeing them myself. But Mr. Hayes is remembered for intoning the phrase, everybody in, nobody out. And so when we began to design this festival, we wanted the musicians to be very visible and accessible to the audience. We wanted the price, of course, to be accessible. We wanted to present an experience that would be really different in the Kennedy Center Concert Hall and on our series. And all of that agency went to the orchestras. But interestingly, as you'll see throughout the week, you're going to find musicians at the Tidal Basin, at the Hamilton, coaching at schools, in galleries of art, that the sense of finished product, of accessibility is going to be teased out in very different ways. And every orchestra and the musicians who are making those commitments to doing the residency events were really excited about doing it, because it's a way for them to get to know our public, to get to know you, and to be very much themselves. And this is something that the orchestras do organically and well.
And to build on that is, in this city, performing in different venues is critical, as opposed to maybe smaller cities or different cities.
In different neighborhoods and communities.
Theaters, clubs, concert halls, not just in a large, expensive, ticket-based event.
Yeah, and to your point, there are many audiences who come to an outdoor stroll who might not wander inside to a performance.
That's right.
But they've had an experience that they might alight to, and we certainly see that, with our summer camps. Kids have a first-time experience, or people who come to some of our outdoor performances. We never know who's in the audience, and when there's a chance to get them excited. And that's something we think about a lot as a presenter. That experience has to compete with what people experience on, TV, the radio, what they can dial up at home. So it's about the musicians, the creativity, the connection that drives people to experience this together. So when you said sharing the space, I think that's something that, even more than relevance, is perhaps the most profound thing. It's the sharing of space, whether it's indoors or outdoors.
Right. And also just want to add to that, I think there are needs of the community that also need to be listened to. And I think some of that is people's voices.
Right.
When I think about, I just don't understand this blue team versus red team, urban versus rural. Schools are bad in both places. Kids don't have what they need in both places. There are not enough jobs or opportunities to grow. We're all in the same boat, and we're paddling in different directions. And it's really easy to say, well, I think we need another youth orchestra. We need another music camp. We need to curate another performance. And quite frankly, what I'm hearing from my parents and from the kids is that, kids need an opportunity. Their kids need opportunities to grow, to be challenged, to be in an environment where the bar is set really high for them.
Right.
Kids want activities. They want to connect with one another. They want to feel proud about something that they have really accomplished as a team. And I think that they want to be seen in a positive light. They want their voices to be heard. That was powerful about that performance in Detroit. We're saying we are important in many ways. We gave voice to that.
Right.
And we did that through the orchestra. Then you have everybody that, sure, we need more taxpayers and we need safer streets, and we need people that are more responsible and that are contributing back to society. And we can give that back. But I just feel that when I look on my Facebook news feed, the big problem is, what a lot of artists are having. And I just think that that's not necessarily the solution. It's really to say, what do the people around us need? And if we take care of that first, then I know that we will be okay. It's just, do we have the will to do it?
Right.
Do we even have the will to listen?
Right.
If not, we will continue to create stuff that folks just don't need, and they're not even there in the audience to even hear it. And then we rely on a very small group of people to keep this afloat. And I just don't think that that's going to really get us into the next 20 years, thinking that we're going to be even more healthy.
Yeah, well.
May I say, just because I want to make sure that it gets said to almost to both of your points, but you said something that made me think of it, and that is, it was actually your notion about being willing to play in different places. What I've said to my orchestra is that we're not going to run away from our versatility. We're going to run towards
Yes.
our versatility.
Yes.
Because you mentioned in our phone meeting that the orchestra is like a community. It's a diverse group of individuals working together for a common good. But at least in the orchestra world, we can become one thing one night. We did 2 weeks ago, we did Ben Folds the first night, Pink Martini the second night, and Shostakovich 10 the third night. Now those weren't all the same people groups, but we were able to be this for this people, this for this people, and this for these people. And we sacrificed nothing in the process. And sometimes that finds itself away from the stage, but in any case, it really is more about us being willing to be different things at different times.
Absolutely. I mean, ultimately, we want our organizations to thrive, and every generation would say they're at a sort of an existential crossroads of doubling down and understanding and articulating what they can do uniquely. There's a very different level of engagement, and frankly, I think it's one of the most exciting parts certainly of our work here, is that there's so many fantastic musicians and creative people living and working in Washington, D.C. As a former music publisher, I knew from the numbers that it had one of the highest choral populations per capita of any place in the country. So many choirs here, so many people making music. And as I moved here and heard and saw what people were creating in clubs, the bands, the ensembles, the culturally specific community performances, I was blown away, and I thought, wow, that could really inform what we choose to program and what we do together. So we created a whole program called the Mars Urban Arts Initiative, where local artists and visiting artists connect and make music together, are featured on our main stage, are featured in free performances, paid performances. It's something that isn't, it's not contrived. It's a way for us to be more fully, a fuller, more dynamic organization, because we have local artists who are fantastic and who we can discover and grow through. I mean, the whole go-go movement here, we had David Harrington with the string quartet, with Rhona String Quartet visiting a couple weeks ago, and he's traveled all over the world. I think many of us have discovered new music through his sort of cultural, anthropological lens. And one of the little girls in the class that the quartet played for raised her hand after they'd played all music from Armenia and Azerbaijan, and she said, do you play any go-go music? And he said, well, what's go-go music? And she described it. And then he came into my office afterwards. He said, I have to hear about this go-go music. and so we played some Chuck Brown and some covers. And he said, okay, I'm always learning. I'm always learning. And of course, it would be, a 10-year-old in the class. And he had that sense of curiosity and sense of curiosity about place and the specificity of communities, and learned something at that moment. And that little girl who had the courage to raise her hand and push him, perhaps pushed him in a creative direction that will inform a future program that we bring to our stages. And we've presented the Go-Go Symphony in the past, but this could be an interesting new collaboration. So I think that's a wonderful sense of discovery if you feel it authentically. We're always learning. Communities change, evolve in different ways. And I love that you're finding resonant ways to support that in your own programming and work.
I wanted to mention something about arts and arts education, which is very near and dear to my heart. You mentioned about bringing opportunities to youth. When the Arc was built, it's a $28 million beautiful glass structure in Southeast, and it houses Levine School of Music, Washington Ballet. It was the Corcoran, now it's going to be the Phillips, the Boys and Girls Clubs, and it's just a whole host. And I was on the board of the dance company at that time, and we were really worried, if we build it, will they come? And we built it. And they opened it, and we said, oh God, if we have 10 kids to start in music, and if we have 5 kids in dance, especially we wanted some boys, not just all girls. We opened the doors. There were like 200 people the first day, 400 within the first week. And it's, of course, pay what you can. But it was bringing the opportunity and giving people a chance to do something and introducing an art form to them, music, dance. And it really changed the landscape of a community.
Yeah. So I know that we have a performance to look forward to.
Wonderful.
Are there sort of some final words you'd like to share, or should we jump into your introduction of Play on Philly?
Jump into music.
Well, thank you for a wonderful discussion.
So we are really excited to perform a brief piece for you. First of all, I'm really, really proud of all of our students at Play on Philly. We brought about 50 or so down yesterday. They performed at The Arc and also made a stop at Howard University. And then I believe we're running around the monuments late at night to 11 or midnight or something. I can't remember what it was, but I'm really, really proud of our students. They represent, you'll see about 20 or so on this stage. There's about 50 that came. There's several of our students here on the front row and several in the back. So if you all could give all of our kids that are here today a big round of applause. And also very, very thankful for our teaching artists that are here and our staff, especially Ryan Crump, who runs our high school program, and Chris Sant'Antasio, who will be the conductor of this ensemble. So they will perform Farandole from Bizet's Elysian. I grew up in Atlanta. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm not built for all that stuff. But they'll perform that for you. I'm pretty sure that we'll need about 2 minutes to kind of get the stage set. And if I am correct, after their performance, I believe we'll take a short break, or do we?
I think we have one more speaker, and then we'll take a break.
Okay,
yes.
So just sit tight for a little bit, but thank you for having our students here to perform, so enjoy that.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Sant'Antasio. I'm the conductor of the Play on Philly Symphony Orchestra. Thank you for having us today, and we'll just begin.
Thank you. Oh, please continue to join us for just a short amount more, and then we'll take a break in a few minutes. But among our many special guests today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Barbara Comstock, Congresswoman from Virginia. Although she recently joined the Kennedy Center's Board of Trustees, Congresswoman Comstock has been a consistent and effective advocate for the arts, having spearheaded the formation of the Arts Caucus in the Virginia House of Delegates, where she served in that body. The Congresswoman was elected this past November to her second term in the House. Representing the nearby Virginia district in the House of Representatives, she has been a supporter for the arts and many of our local cultural organizations. We welcome her leadership. In the House of Representatives, the Congresswoman serves on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, as well as the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, where she is chair of the Subcommittee on Research and Technology, the House Administration Committee in the U.S. House of Representatives, and the Bicameral Joint Economic Committee. I know I join each of you in expressing our appreciation for the strong voice she has had in Congress on behalf of Northern Virginia and Metropolitan Washington. We are honored that she is able to be with us this morning. Please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Barbara Comstock.
Thank you, and good morning to you all. It's a pleasure to be here and to hear that wonderful group. How delightful to see them. And as I was seeing them walk out, thinking with this kind of mentorship, with this kind of support, they will be able to, whatever community they go, hopefully they will find a music home for themselves in their communities, and that's what we're here celebrating today. So I'm honored to be on the Kennedy Center board, also a member of the Arts Caucus, as was mentioned, and also was able to start an Arts Caucus in Virginia. We know our founding fathers were patrons of the arts and understood what an important part of our education it is. Now, it's estimated that there are over 100,000 musicians that perform in approximately 1,600 orchestras throughout the country. So one of the things there that I know from supporting my own local orchestra in McLean, Virginia, where I live, just over the river, is that our protecting our charitable status, tax-giving status, helps many orchestras in our country because most of them are organized as 501c3 tax-exempt organizations. And it's also a great way that we as a community, with any community, wherever you are, can give back and become part of something local. I'm also privileged to have the Wolfe Center for Performing Arts in my district. And one of the things that we were able to do when I was in the State House was to utilize that art center for STEAM education. So it's not just STEM and the science, but also understand the arts works together and be able to have model programs that now they are modeling throughout the country and I believe throughout the world. So this is something we want to, saw young people here, we want to catch them even younger in the arts. So we do know we are going to have some challenges on that front coming up, I imagine, but I've always been supportive of that, and just last Congress we supported equitable access to the arts education in the education bill that we reauthorized, where the bill sets aside approximately $30 million to high-risk schools so they could develop an arts program. Those have been somewhat in decline, and we wanted to make sure that we could reinvigorate that. Now, we also, when you have these local orchestras and local arts groups, local music groups, you end up really providing so much support for your youth orchestra too, and mentoring. And they see people who are engaged. I know in our local orchestra, we have a conductor who not only is the conductor for the McLean Orchestra, she travels all around the country and even all around the world. So she brings back all of her experiences and then works with her local artists who range from professional musicians who are part of this to doctors and lawyers and moms at home who are sort of getting back into the field in that way. And I'm always amazed when I go to our local concerts to see the variety of people who are in that program, and then the quality of our youth orchestras, because they are part of this, and that's a big part of their program, and they understand the community support that's going to be there for them. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's really something I think that is a lifelong part of the learning process, and that the passion that is brought to all of you who are supporters of the arts and transmitted throughout our communities and transmitted back to our children is a very important part of the heritage that we can pass on that's part of our country. And that's why I'm so privileged to be part of the Kennedy Center and many of my local arts groups in order to continue that effort. So thank you for being here today, and enjoy your day, and thank you for your support and patronage of the arts.
Hello, everyone. Jenny Bilfield back again to introduce our wonderful second panel. Hope that you enjoyed your break and had a chance to look at some of the archives that the library has so generously set out for us to enjoy. It's my great pleasure to introduce Karen Dillon, who will then introduce her panel for Risk and Innovation. Karen Dillon was a former editor of the Harvard Business Review and has long chronicled the successes and failures of businesses and their leaders. She's currently a contributing editor to the Harvard Business Review, focusing on topics of leadership, managing people, managing yourself, and entrepreneurship. She's a co-author of the best-selling How Will You Measure Your Life? Competing Against Luck, the Story of Innovation and Customer Choice. And she was previously the deputy editor of Inc. magazine and served as editor and publisher of the critically acclaimed American Lawyer magazine and the London-based Legal Business. She is currently a global ambassador for the Legal 500, providing in-depth analysis of the global legal market. She's a graduate of Cornell and Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism, and she was named by Ashoka as one of the world's most influential and inspiring women in 2011. Please join me as she makes a presentation and then invites her panel to join. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Good morning. I'm very happy to be here around all these creative people. It's very exciting for me, especially talking about innovation. Innovation, I come with the business hat on, but I know it is a global problem. It's a problem for organizations of all sizes and types, literally around the world. And it's something that in the pages of Harvard Business Review we've been writing about for decades without showing much signs of progress. It turns out we may be innovative people, and we think of ourselves that way, but by and large, companies stink at innovation. Let me show you why. This is data from Nielsen, which scans all consumer goods sold, things you might buy at Target or the grocery store. And over a 4-year period, there were 20,000 new products launched. These are in the past 4 years, all of which had smart people. They were good ideas. They were things that seemed like they had all the data and information to be sure these would be hits. Only 92 of them were any definition of a hit. Most of the other ones disappeared. That's a terrible investment rate for a company that's invested time, money, and energy in trying to create something, a new innovation that would bring them more customers or make their customers more loyal to them. The global consulting firm McKinsey recently was surveyed, and 84% surveyed global leaders, and 84% of global leaders said that innovation was extremely important to the success of their company. If you look at the Fortune 500 from, say, 20 years ago and now, that will become very obvious. Many companies that were Fortune 500 staples then are gone from the Fortune 500 now. It's critical to growth and staying alive and staying competitive. But of those 84% who said it was extremely important, 94% of them were very unhappy with their company's performance in innovation. For some reason, really smart people with good ideas keep getting innovation wrong. What is it that we're not asking or doing or knowing that means that we haven't gotten better? Organizations have not gotten better at innovating over the past decades, even with all the data we have now, the technology we can employ, the way we can analyze things. We're still not improving our strike rate. Well, I will submit to you that maybe we're asking for the wrong things. How do you know what is going to make an innovation successful in advance? Mostly, that 92 hits out of 20,000 will tell you it's a little bit of a crapshoot, hit or miss. Try a lot of things. You hope you get it right. You think you understand your customers or prospective customers, and you're going to create something. But is that really a strategy? Try, hit, and miss? Is that good enough, especially when you have limited resources, as I'm guessing some of your companies and organizations do? Well, I'm going to tell you a story of successful innovation that has nothing to do with technology, has nothing to do with focus groups, It has everything to do with understanding the right questions to ask. This is a story where the hero of our tale is a humble dining room table. So there was a Detroit area construction and housing company that built 2-bedroom condos all on the outskirts of Detroit. And they were really lovely. They priced them competitively compared to other condo types of things. They created all kinds of features in it that they knew people would like. Granite countertops, chrome appliances. They aimed at downsizers, people who were probably looking to move from their house into a nicer, more upscale community that would make them feel special about the condo they were buying and the life they were living. They had many, many people come and look at those condos, and yet very few of them converted to a sale. They didn't understand it. They convened focus groups and they asked prospective buyers, what could we add to make this a more attractive apartment for you to buy, a condo for you to buy? And those focus group prospective buyers had no shortage of ideas. Bay windows, squeakless floors. I want more options in cabinets and the pulls on the cabinets. They had a lot of ideas. So they created the showrooms to do that and show that they could create all of those options. Everything the focus group participants wanted, they created a show house, show condo, to demonstrate that that was all possible. That didn't work either. Sales did not improve, and they were literally giving prospective buyers everything they said they wanted. Then they brought in a consultant, a guy called Bob Mesta, who was asked to try to figure out how can we improve sales. He blamed everything, bad weather, salespeople weren't good enough, maybe the hours were bad. They tried to fix all of those things. And so Bob decided to take a different approach. Instead of asking prospective buyers what would make them buy, he asked people who had already bought a condo, tell me about the journey to make the decision to buy this condo. They thought from that they might be able to piece together the ideal demographic or psychographic of a prospective buyer. Did they all come from certain zip codes? Were they all certain income? Could you tell by the car, the actual age? As they went through interview after interview, they couldn't see a pattern. It was really random. They could not predict based on any data about that person if they were going to be a buyer or not. But this one very strange clue kept coming up. People oddly kept mentioning their dining room table. As soon as I figured out what to do with the dining room table, I was free to move. Now that was sort of an odd thing because in most cases they were dining room tables from the 1970s, well-worn, dinged up, chunky old style furniture, not something that would even make sense to bring into these lovely, sleek 2-bedroom condos. It was only as Bob Mesta was sitting at his own dining room table over Christmas that he had a revelation. What does a dining room table stand for? Think about your own. Family. Sitting at a dining room table, you've probably had family celebrations, birthdays, Christmas, Hanukkah. In my house, we did homework on it, and we made forts under it. The dining room table was a visual reminder of the life that these people had built. Getting rid of it, just throwing it out or giving it to charity felt hard. It was giving away something that meant so much to them, was really a powerful indicator of the significance of the move. With that insight, we call that the aha insight, they realized something else was going on. Oops. They weren't in the business of helping people just move to a new condo or buy a condo. They were in the business of helping people move their lives. So when you think about innovating, what did they need to do to those condos to help people move their lives, not just buy a new place to live? That changes the way you think about what you need to add or subtract to make it more appealing. They might have cared about chrome appliances, but that wasn't going to trigger them to move. But when they figured out, okay, we need to take something away, 20% of the second bedroom to make room for that dining room table, that allowed people to not have to make that decision about whether or not they were going to actually leave behind that memory of family. They could choose to take it if they wanted to. They actually raised the prices of the condos, made the bedroom, second bedroom smaller, and then they added a few small things in that made a powerful difference to people. They created on-site storage so that people didn't have to get rid of everything at one fell swoop when they were ready to move. They created a sorting room on on site as well, so that you didn't have to go through every piece of artwork from your children's childhood, or calendars and cards, things you had saved. You could take 2 years to do that. They increased the price a little bit, added those services in, and they were able to improve their sales by 25% at a time when the Detroit area market was having a very hard time otherwise. They were growing when everybody else was shrinking. The aha is in what they realized. People wanted to move lives, not just buy a condo. Now, what is the significance of this? This illustrates something that I've been working on with Harvard Business School professor Clayton Christensen. He's been working on it for 20 years. Clayton Christensen has been called multiple times the most influential management thinker in the world. And he's been struggling for 20 years with the idea of, why are companies so hit or miss at innovation? Why are they so bad at it? And that moving company illustrates his answer to the question. People don't just buy products or services, they hire them, in his language, to do a job for them. And what we mean by that is what we call the causal mechanism in academia. What causes what to happen is not anything about the specifics of the product. It's about how it helps them do that job that they're hiring it to do. Now, this may just sound like a simple language change, but we think it's a really profound and significant change in the way you think about innovation, so that people will actually hire your product or service, or in your case, your organization. We mean something very specific. We call it the job to be done. People are looking to bring a product or service in their life to help them make progress on something that they're struggling with. It's usually surrounded with complex social and emotional components as well, and it's always in particular circumstances. You can innovate successfully if you understand the job to be done for people who are your customers or prospective customers, and offer a solution that does that job better than anything else does. Now, let me illustrate so that you know this isn't just different language talking about it. Thinking about innovation through the lens of jobs to be done changes everything. Table equals family. You can see the powerful social and emotional pieces of that. Ugly table, that's fine, but there is ugly table. It had nothing to do with the function of needing a table to dine on. It had to do with the emotional and social pieces of that. Help me make progress. That is what people are looking to do. And if your product or service helps them do that, then you will successfully bring people to your product or service and keep them there. So what changes if you put on the lenses of jobs to be done? Look at the problem through that distinct point of view. Everything changes. This is a Sony PlayStation. Who's the competition for Sony PlayStation? Xbox, maybe Wii in the old days, my old rickety Wii. Makes sense, right? And I know that they're often compared side by side in sales and prices. That's how you look at it, decide which one to buy. What if I told you this was the competition? How about this? This is my solution. These are these adult coloring books, a new innovation. Have you seen those? These are all competing for a different job than you might have imagined when I showed the Sony PlayStation. They're competing for the job of help me relax. Maybe when I get home from work or on the weekends, help me do something that will take my mind off of whatever else is stressing me at the moment. Now, okay, competing with those, that sounds like a theoretical thing, but is that really true? That's exactly what Netflix understands. Reed Hastings, who's the founder of Netflix, was asked how he saw the competition with Amazon in their videos recently. And he said, we compete with everything you do to relax. A bottle of wine may be our toughest competitor. If you realize you're not just competing with things that are exactly like you, you completely broaden your opportunities to innovate and bring more people to you, your solution to a job to be done. It's not, if it's only something that's exactly like you that you think of as your competition, you probably haven't fully understood the reason people are choosing to hire your service over any other possible solution. The job to be done is complex, and the solution is complex and does not line up along specific category lines. And if you can just begin to think about what you're competing with and open your mind to that, you'll be able to offer a better solution than some of those competitions that you may not realize you're competing with in the first place. What does better mean? I said you'll be able to offer a better solution. This is it's a little hard to see, but there's an air mattress up against the wall in an empty room. This is not better than a hotel room by most standards, right? You probably know where this is going. This is Airbnb. Airbnb was founded not to compete with hotel rooms, which is what you might think. It was competing with not making that trip at all or staying with friends. And the people who hired Airbnb in the beginning wanted to be part of something and feel local. They wanted to be able to attend a conference, or they wanted to feel like they lived in the city of Paris for a few days. It was competing with something entirely different. It was competing with nothing. Competing against nothing is a really good place to be when all other solutions for that job are not better or non-existent. The field is wide open for you. As you probably know, Airbnb is now valued at $30 billion. It's worth more than the top several hotel chains combined. And maybe now they are competing with some higher end offerings, but the innovation came from recognizing a different job to be done. You would never have thought that possible 10 years ago. So, okay, you might buy it. I like the idea of job to be done. Well, how do I find a job to be done? How do I locate it in my community or the people that we want to deal with? What you're looking for is what people are struggling with. You're looking for struggles to make progress. It's always about making progress in particular circumstances. And there are clues that people give off without even realizing. Good innovations are ones that solve problems that have bad solutions now or don't have a solution at all. If your solution to a job to be done is slightly better, or even a little bit more than slightly better than other solutions to the problem, you're not likely to win people over to you. Slightly better does not cause people to switch. We know from Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman that people's risk aversion of loss is so powerful that they're far more likely to accept something, the devil they know, than to risk losing that for something else that may be slightly better. You have to be wildly better or, again, find an opportunity to compete with nothing. That's where you'll find innovation opportunities. You're looking for workarounds. Things people are doing to try to make an existing solution work for them that may give you a clue that there's an opportunity to develop something better here. This is a quick example. Everyone's probably familiar with Quicken's personal financial software, which has been around for a couple decades. That was on the market for 4 years before the founders realized that something funny was going on. They got feedback every year for those first 4 years that people were kind of creating weird ways to use it for small business software, to use Quicken for that. Kludgy, funny ways, but they were using it, buying it for that, and using it for their small business. And they ignored it for 4 years because they thought there is really good accounting software out there that they can buy that makes your books pristine, and it's like having a small accountant on staff. Then they kind of realized that wasn't what people wanted to do. They wanted to not have to worry about doing their books at all. They wanted it to be simple. They weren't competing with that small business software, accounting software. They were competing with hiring your brother-in-law to do your books or stuffing all your receipts in a shoebox and kind of getting around to it at the end of the month. They quickly realized that and corrected it. QuickBooks was launched at twice the price of the best small business accounting software, and it was the market leader within months, and it still is. That whole company, Intuit, focuses on the job to be done with all of their product innovations now. Non-consumption. Basically, you're looking for something where people would rather do nothing than try to solve their problem because they don't like any of the solutions out there. Have any of you seen those commercials on TV for Southern New Hampshire University? There's a blue bus that's going around the country handing out diplomas to people. If you haven't heard of Southern New Hampshire University, SNHU, I think they call themselves in the commercials, you should. It's one of the biggest success stories in education of the past decade. Southern New Hampshire University was a small, nondescript liberal arts college, it is, in New Hampshire, that realized they were in trouble, like so many other small, nondescript liberal arts colleges in not competing at the top level about 10 years ago. They knew every year exactly how many students they would get, how many they'd compete with from these 3 other local universities. The win and loss rate was almost always the same. There was no prospect of growth, and financial survival was in question. Then they kind of realized they did have this sleepy beginning arm that was doing what they called distance learning for people who didn't want to come to campus but wanted to make progress towards a degree. Their big aha insight was that that distance learning Wasn't competing with Harvard or Yale or even the local universities around them. It was competing with nothing. Those people who were doing distance learning were trying to decide if it was worth going back to school to get a degree when they perhaps had aborted it or never had it in the first place. Maybe I should just stick in this job for 2 more years and try to get promotions. They would rather do nothing than accept a really difficult solution that would require them to drive to campus or take weekends and nights that they didn't have to work on extra credit projects and things like that. With that insight, you're competing with it's better to do nothing than to pursue your education further. They made sure that everything about their online program worked for people who were working long days, weekends, maybe sitting down at the computer at 11 o'clock at night. They didn't need to be as good as Harvard in many ways. They needed to be good for the job people were hiring them to do, which was make my life better. They've been wildly successful. They stage on campus, I think 5 separate graduation ceremonies now, not on campus, at the town's biggest, the Verizon Arena, because so many people who have never set foot on campus all their years towards a degree come for that moment of getting the cap and gown and getting their degree, and it's a huge success story. They were competing with people who were choosing to do nothing. Oops. My clicker's not advancing. There you go. Look for unusual uses. Any of you ever knock back a couple of spoonfuls of NyQuil when you really just wanted a good night's sleep? Lots of people do that. Turns out, the company finally recognized that they didn't need NyQuil, all the ingredients in NyQuil, they needed sleep. Thus, the birth of ZQuil, which has none of those cold medicine things in it. That was a clue. There was an innovation opportunity to be had here. Jobs in our own lives. Most of us actually know, if you think about things you're struggling with, things that you wish there were solutions for, you may be the best beginning germ of an idea for a job to be done that you can share with others. If you have it, others might too. This is an illustration of care.com, which is the online babysitter matchmaking service for parents, and elder care and dog care now, as it turns out. That was founded by a woman called Sheila Marcella, who was having trouble finding a solution for her own daycare needs. And she created what is now, I think, a $65 million company. Negative jobs, things we do not want to have to do. People don't want to do this, so any solution that makes it easier for them to not fully do that. Think of the last time you woke up and your kid says they have a sore throat. You know it's probably strep throat, but man, going to the doctor, what a pain. You have to call, wait till the office opens. You can't go into work for a few hours. You sit there, and you know they're just going to say antibiotics or whatever. Well, CVS Minute Clinic was born when a dad sat in the emergency room with his daughter for just a little too long, got a little too annoyed having to wait for what ended up being a simple prescription of antibiotics. That was what we call a negative job. I don't want to have to do that. There's a solution that is way better than having to do it, found. This is really important to know. Jobs are not just tasks. They're not just something functional. They involve experiences, and that's really important to understand. The experience, this is where the social and emotional components of it come in. You can't successfully innovate if you just serve the functional need of whatever it is, because the other things are actually far more powerful. We believe that if you actually understand the job to be done properly, customers will pay a premium price for a solution that does it better than anything else. So this is not a race to the bottom. This is actually a race to give people what they most value and most care about. Here's my favorite case in point. American Girl doll. Company's been around for 30 years. Many, many people have tried to compete with it by creating similar dolls. You'll see them in Target, you'll see them in the Disney store, Walmart. Have any of you ever paid, the current price I think is $120 for an American Girl doll? Me. I've bought several of them. And then the wardrobe on top of that, which is, you could outfit yourself for some of what you pay. Do you think, are we paying $120 for a doll because those dolls are so special? The individual doll. They're nice dolls. I don't think there's anything incredibly special or unique about them. We're paying for something else. What's the real job of the American Girl doll? It's a chance to connect with our preteen daughters and nieces and children in a way that we didn't think we could before. People said there was no doll market. Girls aged out of dolls at age 7 before American Girl dolls were invented. And Pleasant Rowland, the woman who started it, was told there's no chance that this will succeed. The only options at that age and stage, up to age 7, were Cabbage Patch dolls in those days and really hypersexualized Barbies and Bratz and things like that. And that wasn't a good enough answer for her, wanting to connect with her nieces. American Girl dolls not only come in a very special box, the experience of going with your mom or your dad to get your doll. This is a sample. I actually took this off someone's blog where they were doing highlights of their cross-country trip with their family. This was one of their highlights. This is the American Girl doll restaurant, where if you don't have a doll, you can babysit one while you're there. You can, of course. They have birthday parties there. There's something about having that special experience with your mom and your dad that people remember forever. And the dolls all have backstories, historical backstories. There's something that makes us feel good as parents about giving our children American Girl dolls because they're substantial. And maybe we'll have conversations about the feelings. $120. I can't think of any product that you willingly put out that kind of money for. But this one absolutely understands the job to be done. And everything about the American Girl experience is tailored to that. Again, you put on the lenses of seeing a job to be done and not just the function of a product or service. Everything about what goes into that and how you treat your customers, how you talk to your customers changes. So I'm going to ask you, I heard a lot of interesting things this morning at the panel discussion about what job, you didn't use those words, but that was what it was, what job orchestras have to do now, or people want to hire them to do. It's changed clearly from the old days where perhaps it was clearer. Are you selling a product, or are you solving a job for people? One of them will give you ample opportunity to innovate and potentially charge premium prices and competitive advantage, all things all organizations want to have, because people will know that you've helped them make the progress that they want to make. The other one is just as good as the other next competitor, will be compared side by side. You've reached success when people don't shop around. They just know that they want to go straight to your service. They want to go straight to what you offer because it does the job better than anybody else. It's what we call a purpose brand. You want to be a purpose brand for what job you're solving best. And I'm going to illustrate this, the difference between talking about the product you're selling and selling your response to a job. If you could show the first video. This is an old Snickers commercial.
Can I help you enjoy that Snickers? Happy peanuts soar over chocolate-covered mountaintops and waterfalls of caramel. Prancing nougat in the meadow sings a song of satisfaction to the world. The world. That's right.
Okay, we heard about prancing nougat and waterfalls of caramel. Those are all the features and benefits and the quality ingredients that go into Snickers. Is that exciting as a commercial? Do you think that makes anyone want to go? Put on your own lenses for your own organization. Are you doing a version of this? Talking about the ingredients and the quality and all the components that you know are superior, but maybe just add up to a list of things to offer people. Now, from a different perspective, if you put on a job to be done lens and you think about how are you talking to your customer, how are they seeing you as a solution to their job to be done, you'll approach it entirely differently. Snickers now is one of the best-selling, I think it is the best-selling candy bar in the United States. And one critical insight, I think, led to that development. They recognized when and how and why, the job to be done, people actually hired a Snickers bar. Turns out a lot of us hire it when we're hungry and angry, a concept they call hangry, right? It's not necessarily competing with the Three Musketeers or any of the other. It's competing with peanuts or food or a meal. You're hungry and you want to be fed quickly. You want something that's going to stop that hangry thing from taking over you really quickly. If you watch in airports, you'll see lots of people buy Snickers, and they think it's people who are racing for planes and haven't had food. It's a very different job to be done than just something sweet to fill me with joy at the moment. So this is the approach they've taken that's a very clear job to be done communication about hiring a Snickers bar when you're hangry. If you could play the next one.
Mike, come on!
Mike, what is your deal, man?
Oh, come on, man. You've been riding me all day.
Mike, you're playing like Betty White out there.
That's not what your girlfriend said.
Baby!
Whoa,
That's not quite. Eat a Snickers. Better?
Better. Hey! How about that? That hurt.
You're not you when you're hungry. Snickers satisfies.
See the difference? The fact that we all respond to that second commercial differently is we understand that concept, and we might hire a Snickers when we're hangry. How are you talking to your customers and your prospective customers and the customers who are hiring nothing rather than solving their job to be done? Do you know what the job to be done is that you've been hired to do? If you don't, I would urge you to think long and hard about that. Talk to the people who already have hired you and talk to people who haven't been hired you at all, to try to identify that, because once you have that in mind, it can become a real guiding beacon for all of your innovation efforts, and one that we believe is far more likely to succeed and not leave you vulnerable to the hit or miss of innovation. Thank you very much.
All right. I'll sit here.
Okay.
Look, Karen, thank you for that fantastic presentation.
You're welcome.
Entertaining, and you kind of drove us right to the intersection of art and business, and we're going to get right into that in a second, but let me introduce our panel first. And, and I'm Jesse Rosen, President of the League of American Orchestras. Kevin Schuck runs the Boulder Philharmonic. He is a molecular biologist by training, an avid outdoors person. We'll hear more about that soon. Sandy runs the North Carolina Symphony, also has worked with the Seattle Symphony, Cleveland Orchestra, a great colleague. And Sarah Kirkman-Snyder, a composer whose biography reads like a Lifetime Achievement Award. She has been performed by every major orchestra, collaborated with every major artist, been commissioned by every commissioning source, and an extraordinary talent. Thank you and welcome, panel.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yes.
Gosh, there's so many places to jump into this. The Snickers commercial, the first one with the guy singing, actually reminds me of orchestra press releases and brochures from not too long ago, where they just heaped praise and praise and praise upon themselves and describing all the ways they were wonderful, in the same way that guy was singing about the Snickers bar. And now, of course, orchestras communicate about themselves and express themselves very differently. And maybe it's a place to jump in to pick up with Karen's last question, which is, you know, how has our job changed? And there was certainly a time, I think, when we thought about orchestras were delivering products and services. We created concerts and people came. Now we kind of think we maybe have a different job. And Sandy, why don't you start us off maybe with a reflection on where we've been and where we're going to?
Actually, I'd like to reflect on the presentation. What business am I in, or what's the job that I'm trying to sell for? So I believe that in the case of the North Carolina Symphony, we are not seeking to be the Chicago Symphony or the Cleveland Orchestra or the Berlin Philharmonic. We are seeking to be the orchestra of our community. In our case, we serve the entire state of North Carolina through orchestral performance, as well as our music education series. So we want to provide music that is unique to our area, to our orchestra, because you can get the greatest Beethoven symphony performed by the Berlin Philharmonic. They do that really well. But what we do very, very well is produce concerts that are meaningful to a North Carolinian, and you will hear that tomorrow night at our performances at the Kennedy Center. Mm-hmm. So my job is to find those tentacles, to find those opportunities for us to connect to our community in unique and different ways.
And do you think, is that a relatively new development in orchestras, or is that we've been in the field a while. Has that kind of been that way for a bit?
I came to North Carolina from the Cleveland Orchestra. I don't know that we spent a lot of time talking about connecting to the musical DNA of our community.
Right.
So.
And Kevin, how about you? How do you think about the job of orchestras today?
Sure, I think there's a lot of resonance in how we think about it at the Boulder Philharmonic with what Sandy just said in North Carolina. It's that, well, in our case, about 8 years ago, so you're asking how, recently these kinds of thoughts have been in the orchestra field. About 8 years ago, our board had done a strategic planning exercise, whereas, our goal as an orchestra was to reflect those qualities that make our community unique and special. Every community is unique in different ways, and so I think in our case, we were just looking to tie music into, in our case, what makes Boulder unique. And I think that's very much part of the zeitgeist. It's what at League of American Orchestra conferences we're talking about a lot these days, and it's good to see orchestras like this week that are having some success in those areas.
We also codified, our board codified our point of view on programming to be uniquely North Carolina focused and of national significance. But we had been doing this work in the early 2000s.
And Sarah, a different kind of person than Sandy and Kevin and Karen and myself. You're a creator. And so, I mean, how do you think about this?
How do I feel about...
How do you think about the job you do as a composer? And has that changed for you?
Yeah, well, as a composer, I think what drew me to music and from the very beginning was the power of music to communicate and express emotion. And as a child, I was just utterly fascinated by that. And still to this day, I feel that my job is to communicate something with an audience, to put something, that you can't, a feeling that you can't put into words. That's what music can accomplish. So, yeah, I really see my job as being one of communication. And that's not necessarily true for every composer, but for me, it definitely feels that way.
Great. And I'm kind of curious, thinking about some of these changes that are taking place. The question Karen poses in her presentation about how do you know and how do you come to understand your constituents, your public. And it's, in the arts, this is kind of a little bit of a different question than it is in business, because after all, we're not exactly prepared to give up everything we do in order to become something else because it's more profitable. That's not our thing. So, Kevin, talk a little bit about this question of how do we know and how do we balance what we come to know an audience is looking for with what we feel is somehow defining of who we are. What can change, what can't change?
Sure. Well, the first thing about the job that is to be done, I think with orchestra concerts, I think it's a challenge because there are different segments coming with different jobs to be done in a single concert. I think so that makes it difficult to balance all of these things and to come up with a satisfying experience. But it is also, I think, a great potential for a very rich experience. And what I mean by that is there are people that are coming for the sole purpose that they want to hear the great live jukebox for this music they know, they've learned, and they love. And I think that's the traditional job that we think of orchestras as doing. Well, you can still do that and at the same time be thinking about what are the social reasons that people are there. And I think there's a lot of resonance to what Sarah was saying about the emotional resonance of music. I think orchestras are uniquely positioned to create community. In our current world where it is, highways, suburbia, fast food, these things, people are looking for a place where you can come and there is an authentic connection. Orchestras are uniquely positioned to do this because we are bringing together people in a shared space for a shared experience. It's something very different from the day-to-day. And I think that that is something that we can harness as organizations to really create something very special. And so as far as the job to be done, I think that certainly there's this relaxation or leisure time big bubble. And so, we think, who are we competing against? We're competing against Netflix. We're competing against the couch. So really, when you look at this leisure bubble, you're really talking about there's a subset of that which is in some way people are looking for something that's more fulfilling or enriching or special or has a night out component to it. And so I always think that our biggest struggle is growing the piece of that leisure time relaxation pie that people are looking for, those kind of quality outlets. And so I think that leads a lot of the thinking that we do about how we're going to get people into concerts.
So I know a lot of people who would violently disagree with the idea that going to an orchestra concert is a great way to be together with other people. I mean, after all, it's a terrible time. It's at 8 o'clock at night. You have to rush through dinner. You get home late. You have to listen to music. Some of it you might like, and a lot of it you might not like. And it's really expensive, and you can't talk, you can't drink, and it's formal and rigid and uncomfortable, unlike most other performing arts experiences. So, unless I'm...
Where do I buy a ticket?
I think there might be more than one or two people who feel that way. So, I mean, how does an orchestra confront, some of these very changing ways that people feel about going to concerts?
Well, you've ticked off a lot of barriers that we are always looking at and talking about. And so I think one way we think about it is how can you put out the welcome mat? Because yes, if a newcomer to the performing arts or orchestras in particular is just looking at it, all of those negatives are just too easy to think of. So instead, we try to think about, okay, what are the entry points? What are the doorways we can create? What are the welcome mats we can put out? And so in our case at the Boulder Philharmonic in Colorado, I mentioned that we are trying to reflect the qualities that make our community special. And so a lot of times that means meeting people where they are. In Boulder, that usually means on a trail somewhere. I think last week it was the city with the highest rate of exercising or something in the country. It's a very overachieving in many dimensions. And so in our case, we thought, okay, well, how do we meet people on their turf, so to speak, and create a welcome mat there? And in our 2013-2014 season, we were exploring works that were inspired by the natural world. When you come to Boulder, that's one of the first things that you notice is that we have this very scenic backdrop, and that's what draws a lot of people there, and that's what people are actively enjoying. So if that's part of your culture, and that's where people are spending their leisure time, and that's where their interests are, how can you then convert that into a welcome mat to get people into the concert hall? So since we had a list of repertoire of composers that were inspired by music, we were commissioning new works along this vein as well. I had the crazy idea to reach out to our city open space department, which is a big deal in town, and I wrote them a letter basically saying, we're performing music inspired by nature, I think we should collaborate. And I went ahead and mentioned a few possibilities for this, thinking that they'd either just laugh me aside. But within 2 days, I was meeting with the entire senior staff of the Open Space Department because they said that's exactly what we're interested in. And so we've been using our collaboration with them to create that welcome mat to kind of put those all those negatives aside and actually show that it can be something that is social. People on the trail are enjoying conversations, sharing music, and when they come to the concert hall, it's the same as well. You can, during intermission, people are buzzing. I've met people that I met on a hike that we do. Then I'll see them at the concert hall, and it's like, oh, that's just amazing. When I heard that piece, I could just see the geese flying over the Sawhill Pond, for example.
Kevin mentioned collaboration, and I think that is an area where we invest a good amount of our time to create programs that where we collaborate with another organization. One example is the Museum of Natural Sciences in Raleigh. The museum created visuals that celebrated the 150th anniversary of the 100th anniversary, excuse me, of the state parks of North Carolina. We performed the Four Seasons, and together this performance, which couldn't resonate in any other state than North Carolina, our audience members, which expanded to the museum's audience members as well, and those people just interested in the state parks, brought together the sum of all those parts, something bigger than any one of us could have been, and creates a performance that can't be replicated by something else, listening on the radio. How old of me to mention a radio? Or, you know, watching Netflix or doing nothing. You had to be there in that space to see those three critical elements brought together in performance.
Terrific. And Sarah, you've created a piece that the North Carolina Symphony is going to play in a couple of nights on Wednesday night. And I understand that that came together in a way that also really brought people together. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So a few years ago, Martin Scher came to me and said, you know, I understand that you have some family connections to North Carolina. Would you be interested in writing a piece about that? And I jumped at the opportunity because North Carolina has always felt like my spiritual home, my ancestral home. My family had been there for 13 generations, and my father was the first to leave, and he worked in New York, so we lived in New Jersey, but we would spend a lot of time during the year in North Carolina, and I really thought of it as this place where I belonged. So I was very excited to write this piece, and I thought, you know, what should it be about? I thought it should be about those feelings of you know, what does home mean, and what is a longing for home? What does that feel like? What is that about? You know, is it about family? Is it about landscape? Is it about the things that you did there? So I decided that I would try to write a piece about the nature of memory and longing for a place in your past. And I had this idea that it might be interesting to combine it with a film component because so much of my memory of North Carolina was sense memory based, you know, the way things looked, the way the sunlight cast shadows on my grandparents' patio, the way the town looked, the things that I did with my family. I thought it would be interesting to look at some of that from an abstract cinematic perspective and to have that accompany the music so that it would be this kind of dreamy exploration somewhere between memory and a dream, but one that the audience would have some kind of reference point for the emotional journey that the music was exploring. So we went down to North Carolina and shot some footage actually of my own children recreating some of my memories and my father's memories. Yeah, so it became a real sort of look at small town life in North Carolina. And
it's been performed already, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they performed it several times last year in North Carolina and also
and
actually
the hometown,
in New Jersey.
Yes.
Yeah, the other co-commissioner is the Princeton Symphony, which was the actual place of my birth and growing up. So so that was neat as well. But yeah, they performed it too.
Yeah. And how did the origin of the work, I mean, when it was finally performed, what kind of impact, I mean, what was the significance of all that led up to creating the piece when it finally came to the public?
Well, that was what was so remarkable, was having all of these friends and family from North Carolina come to the premiere, and they felt so emotionally connected to the piece and what they saw, and for them it really resonated with their own memories of North Carolina. So that was really extraordinary, just the sense of community that was brought about by the project. A number of the people had participated in the making of the film, had recreated a lot of these social scenes that we shot, and so it really felt like this galvanizing collective memory exercise in a sense, and that was really special. Yeah.
And we were able to perform it in the community that evoked all of these memories, Salisbury, North Carolina. And we've had 2 performances of it there and have performed it in other locations, including our headquarter hall in Raleigh. So.
And that's what's amazing is actually a lot of people from North Carolina are traveling up for this performance.
Yeah.
They feel a sense of ownership and investment in it, which is really special.
And Sarah is a star.
No.
So.
I just hear a job in that right away. It'd make me feel proud of being a North Carolinian, and that's you've checked all those boxes. It's maybe about the music, but the music is a way to achieve the progress, right? Make me feel proud of it. I hear success on a job there. Thanks.
So I'm thinking back to Karen's slide, the one that showed that was 92 out of 2
92
million?
out of 20,000 products, yeah.
So listening to you, it sounds like we're in the 92 camp, that somehow we've figured this out.
Right.
But I mean, people have written so many books about innovation. It must be hard and complicated. So I'm curious, as you go through these changes, I mean, is there any tension around this, or is it just you got it all figured out?
I think there's inevitably tension when you go outside of the box of a traditional art form. I mean, I think that's just kind of taken for granted. But, well, two things about the words both innovation and risk. I really don't like to think that we're trying to innovate all the time. That's actually not kind of the vocabulary we use. We're instead trying to be creative. And I think that it's about looking for the connections, looking for ways that, that music can reach different parts of your community. In doing that, the end result is often that what your programming is innovative, but we're not pursuing that in and of itself as our goal, because I think that leads you down the rabbit hole of you could be doing things that are different just for the sake of being different. Rather than if you are following it from from the standpoint of where the art takes you, where that creativity takes you, then it leads you into a more authentic place that might happen to be innovative. Mm-hmm. And I think that, as far as, is there a tension? I mean, there are certainly traditional audience members who are happy with the music just the way it is. In talking to a lot of people, I hear this like, well, I understand why you're doing that. Oh, because they see that our audiences are growing by leaps and bounds. And so they see the effect of it. They are invested in the music. They want it to be successful. So they get behind it. So even though that's not the job, I guess, they're looking for the concert to fulfill for them, we're able to bring them along because they see the effect. They see that it is done in a way that, again, which is authentic and not gimmicky, which, again, I think if you focus on just trying to be innovative, that's where you can end up a lot of times. And so that's how we've been able to manage that. Mm-hmm.
I would just argue that might be doing the job for them. The job for them might be, I want to be a pillar of this community, and this is the way I feel. If you think narrowly about what the job is, again, and you think innovation is a rabbit hole, it might be. But if you think about the job and you only add or focus on how to make that experience better, they still feel like a pillar of the community. Maybe you've done it better because you're a growing organization. It's not an either or.
Mm-hmm.
So if the job of orchestras is, or among the jobs are creating experiences that connect with people, connect with community, and have moved beyond, the transactional product, we're selling a concert. So is this good for business? Because you're running businesses too, right?
Yeah, we're running businesses, and we worry a lot. I spend a lot of time worrying about risk and limiting the risk, the financial risk, and so we've come up with some solutions that that reduce the risk for us. So, for example, everyone wants the millennial audience, and the elusive millennial audience. And so we would. There was a time we would put on a concert that would have hybrid music in it, and our marketing department would be in the corner stewing about, selling tickets and where they're going to come out, and let's get food trucks and let's sell martinis, and moving away from actually what our business is. And a couple of years ago, we decided, let's take that money, let's eliminate the tension within the organization, let's talk to our musicians about a concept of giving them money to develop a program that would be held in, for example, a club in our case, downtown Raleigh, that I would not go to. I would posit, well, maybe Sarah would go to it, but most of us might not go to this because we wouldn't even know about the club. We wouldn't. The marketing would not darken my door. It wouldn't, and can we be more successful at reaching an audience that they were not reaching in a traditional performance, close up and personal with our musicians who have chosen the repertoire they're going to play, who have used their social network to bring people to the concert, and let's not charge a ticket price. Let's have a cover charge, and so those reduce the financial risk. Let's not put these in big giant halls because they don't belong in big giant concert halls, and stew about filling all of those seats. And let's make the connection that way. And so that's an example of it making sense both in terms of resource and inspiration, I posit, to our musicians as well.
And are you seeing positive changes in attendance at the North Carolina Symphony?
We over time we have, yes, yes. We've grown our ticket revenue by $1 million in this planning cycle that we're in right now. We're at the end of a 5-year planning cycle. And that's by doing a variety of different things, not just performing Beethoven symphonies, but making sure that we're reaching out to the entire community. So, yeah.
Kevin, how about you? Good for business?
Yes, it's good for business. Since 2009, our ticket sales have grown 66%, subscriptions 44%. Contributed revenue by similar amounts. And I think it's because when you do this type of work, you're increasing the number of stakeholders in your organization and the community. So if you do one of the collaborations like what Sandy was talking about, which is a really key part for us, like in these years, 45 different organizations we've collaborated with. And some of these are what you'd expect, other performing arts organizations, but some are what you would not expect, like social service organizations or nature and science and youth organizations. And every time you do it, well, you're going to get new ticket buyers in the door, maybe just for that one concert. A certain portion will come back, but even for the people that didn't come to the concert, they now have a touch point for your organization. So they think that, oh, this organization supported something that I care about, so it's a a check mark in your column for good favor. And I think that community goodwill can't be underestimated. The snowball effect, I think, is really what it is that each time you do something like this, it's another ripple in the pond. You're reaching additional people. And sometimes it's, we go to a lot of effort for something we think is a good idea that really makes sense, and maybe the impact is not as big as what we'd hoped for, and sometimes it goes beyond our wildest projections. But it's a cumulative effect, and it's, I think, committing to this type of approach systematically and organically throughout your organization, which over the long run has these benefits.
Right. Sarah, I'm not going to ask you about business, but I am interested, as a creative person working a lot with orchestras, what's the optimum for you in a relationship with an orchestra that allows you to fully realize all of your artistic aspirations?
I've had a really extraordinary experience with North Carolina working on this project because we've had multiple performances, multiple rehearsals. Getting that kind of time, to get to know a conductor and get to know the members of the orchestra, the administration, really enables, the project to go that much deeper and be that much more satisfying. I've since revised the piece, a few times, and I'll be revising it again. So yeah, I think that having, any kind of second performances, multiple performances for a composer these days are pretty unusual in the orchestral world. So having a chance to go deeper is really pretty extraordinary. But I think any time that, an orchestra can take a moment to really work with a living composer is an incredible experience for everybody. I mean, it's great for the community, it's great for composers, obviously. It's great for the orchestra to feel connected to living, breathing music that, that they can have a role in introducing to the world. I just think the more, that living composers can be introduced to orchestras, the better for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of the center of the whole thing.
Right, exactly.
So Karen, you've had about 3 hours to get to know the wonderful world of orchestras, and from what you've heard, challenge us. I mean, tell us, you're an expert on this stuff, on shifting and changing, and what words of wisdom?
One word of wisdom I would sort of pass on from Clay Christensen, they're not original to me, but that the reason that so many great organizations ultimately fail when faced with competition from what he calls disruptors. small upstarts that initially you don't see as a threat, and then little by little they gain market share. A great example is Blockbuster, now bankrupt, and Netflix. Netflix was the disruptor. His theory is called the theory of disruption, far more famous than the theory of jobs to be done, is that the incumbent, the established company, in the face of that competition, they get nervous and start making their product better and better, more expensive, add more layers of gold. You know, they make it so that they want to make it more valuable to their customer base. But what that does is makes them have an increasingly smaller customer base because people start deciding, this is good enough. Why should I spend that? So I would just I love hearing some of these creative ideas for alternative things here, the caution to not chase your market up further and further to the point of losing them to a disruptor because you think the best response to that threat is to make ours better. Again, I would say better in what way? Better for whom? Better for what job? Make sure that that better is always focused on what those customers want. And it's okay if it comes in the form of you're disrupting yourself with smaller ideas. I mean, you might as well disrupt yourself and get all the revenue from both the disruption and the existing one. Yeah. So just to be careful not to over-gild the lily in search of better when, you know, better is that people come and hear you however you want to be heard. So just to keep that in mind.
Terrific. Well, before hangry assaults all of us, let me give each of our panelists a minute to talk about your concert. Kevin, yours tonight, Sandy, Wednesday night, and Sarah, you can tag team your Wednesday night. Tell the folks about your concerts.
Okay, well, the Boulder Philharmonic is honored to kick off the inaugural Shift Festival tonight. Our program is, as I mentioned, has an unabashedly programmatic title in Nature and Music, which is bringing all those kind of initiatives I was just talking about to DC. We open with a new commission. It was commissioned with National Endowments for the Arts money, the Imagine Your Parks initiative to commemorate the centennial of the National Park Service. We have an adventurer composer who we've worked with before, Stephen Lias. It'll be the premiere of his work inspired by Rocky Mountain National Park. After that, we have a mandolinist from here close in Virginia. His concerto is called From the Blue Ridge. So our goal with the Nature and Music was not just to show off Colorado with lots of pretty pictures of our mountains, but also that these things are universal, so we have something from local audiences here as well, from your backyard as well. The second half opens up with a piece, Ghost of the Grasslands by Steve Heitzig. This is about the prairies, the lesser known half of Colorado. And the interesting percussion instruments like stalks of prairie grass, bison bones, squeak toys that sound like prairie dogs. And then that takes us into the grand finale, which is Copeland's Appalachian Spring, with something which is pretty eye-popping, Frequent Flyers Aerial Dance, dance company we brought with us from Boulder, do a beautiful rendition suspended above the orchestra.
Wow.
Wow. And I have my tickets. So the North Carolina Symphony will bring a program is bringing a program that demonstrates who we are. We have two works by Robert Ward, who spent his mature part of his life in North Carolina and was the dean of the school, the University of North Carolina School for the Arts. And eventually became an audience member of the North Carolina Symphony, so we bookend the performance with two of his works. We will be joined by North Carolina-born, Pulitzer Prize-winning composer and performer Caroline Shaw, who will be the soloist in her work, Low. Sandy, think.
Mason Bates.
Thank you, Mason Bates. I was going to hand it over to you. Mason Bates' work that is evocative of his time spent in the Carolinas. I believe he uses cicada in his sounds in his piece called Rusty Carolina. And then the big centerpiece of our program is our co-commission of Sarah's work, which maybe you could tell us a little bit more about.
Oh, okay. Well, I felt like I gave you all a lot of information, but the name of the piece is Hiraeth. It's a Welsh word that means a longing for a time or a place in your past that you can no longer return to. So yeah, I'm excited about that. And then there's also
on Thursday night, we'll be at the Co-God Gallery, or the auditorium, thank you, space, courtyard, there you go, space, and with a program that we performed at an art museum on Saturday night, and that featured Sarah's piece, Unremembered, that has been traveling the globe, so her piece with our orchestra, and as well a piece called By and by Caroline Shaw. That program is an example of the North Carolina Symphony getting out of a traditional concert hall, which we do frequently, and performing our works in a different space. So
I think it's worth highlighting too that it's something special about North Carolina Symphony is that they like to go deep with the composers they work with. So they do multiple pieces by a certain set of composers rather than lots of pieces by lots of different composers, which I think is really special because it enables the community to get to know artists better and feel a stronger connection to each piece that they hear because they have a little more context for it.
Right. Earlier today, some of us right here in this library were looking at the original manuscripts of Mozart and a lock of Beethoven's hair and Bartók's manuscript from the Concerto for Orchestra, Haydn symphonies. And I couldn't help thinking this great sense of tradition and old stuff. And here we are hundreds of years later, we're still playing the same music. We're still playing it with the same instruments and the same orchestra. And it reminded me, this will sound a little crazy, but I've been watching the hearings for Judge Gorsuch, and so the word originalist, which I didn't know before, now I know what an originalist is, but the tension around, the past and how does the past live as you go into the future is a question that kind of runs through so many aspects of our lives. And I think the work happening in orchestras of asking those same questions. We know this incredible tradition, we learn from it, we revere it, we're in awe of it, and yet we're also in a completely different place and a different time. And so how do we make that alive and real for today? And I think that's kind of the journey orchestras have been on, along with probably the rest of America. So anyhow, thank you for being with us, and big thanks to our panel.
So, many thanks to our panelists and participants. Thank you for being here. And just a final word, if we have piqued your appetite and you don't yet have tickets for everything, they're still available. I hope that you'll find the Shift events located on the Kennedy Center website. Also at the bottom of the Washington Performing Arts homepage, just click a link and it'll take you to a whole series of residency events that are free in the community, as well as the performances that start up at the Kennedy Center tonight on the main stage, Millennium Stage, all over the city. Please join us. We need your energy. We want your support and participation. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you to the Library of Congress for hosting. We look forward to seeing you this week. Thank you.